Chapter 2. Here we go, guys. So in Chapter 1 of the Cold War video series here, we sort of looked at the origins of the Cold War, where it all came from. We learned about the Potsdam Conference. We knew what Truman wanted, and we knew what Stalin wanted, and then we see the world enter the atomic age with the Manhattan Project, right? So that's questions 1 through 4 right here. Now let's just move down a little bit and let's have a discussion about questions 5 through 16, which is the second chapter of the media-rich Cold War video series. So number 5 says, explain Churchill's metaphor of the Iron Curtain. Which states were behind it? So the Iron Curtain, guys, is basically the separation between Europe, which is free and not controlled by the Soviet Union, and then Europe that is not free and controlled by the USSR, by Stalin. Now, which states are behind it? Let's have a quick look here. So, there's a nuke. In this particular part of your learning modules here, we can see the nations behind the Iron Curtain. So in this view here, we have the Soviet Union, which is basically this country right here, right? And then we see these nations right here, which are behind the Iron Curtain. So it included East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Now, there was another communist state as well in the area known as Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist today anymore. But they eventually break free from the Soviet sphere of influence and sort of declare their own communist independence. So yeah, in this particular image here, guys, we can see the Iron Curtain and its ramifications between, in blue here, right, free Europe, which is liberal and democratic, and then to the east of the Iron Curtain, which is right here, we can see these nations which are behind the Iron Curtain and now controlled, as the term is, a satellite state, right? So Poland, East Germany, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, they're all satellite states, which basically means they're controlled by the Soviet Union, although officially not a part of the USSR. But you can bet your bottom dollar that they're controlled by puppet dictators, which are controlled by Stalin and the Soviet government. So that's number 1. Now, number 5. Number 6, explain the concept of sphere of influence for the Soviets. Why did they want to expand their sphere of influence? Okay, sphere of influence, guys, refers to sort of like the ideological reach that your system has. So if you're the Soviet Union and you have one other nation that joins your sphere of influence, you look kind of weak. If you have 2 nations, all right, things are getting better. If you have 3 nations, 4 nations, okay, this is good. If you can control all of the world, except for America, who is your ideological enemy, well, that's even better. So what the Soviet Union wanted to do after the Second World War is expand their sphere of influence to cover the entirety of the globe. Remember, communists believe that communism will be the salvation of the proletariat, right? So what they want to do is spread their sphere of influence throughout the world. Now, to combat this, we see what's in question number 7. 7 says, from an American perspective, explain the policy of containment and what its one overt goal was. When I think containment, guys, I think of I don't know if you ever had this experience or not, but like, let's say there's a gross, yucky spider in your house and you don't want to touch it. So what you do is you take a glass and you just put it over the spider so that it can't go anywhere, right? That spider is contained inside that glass. So this policy of containment, guys, containment is the foreign policy that America embarked upon during the Cold War. The whole point of containment is to not let communism spread anywhere else. The USSR had already spread into those states behind the Iron Curtain. Communism had spread to those states behind the Iron Curtain. And America did not want to see communism spread anywhere else. So what it wanted to do was contain communism within the areas behind the Iron Curtain and not have it expand anymore. Now, we see sort of a twofold approach with this idea of containment. And in number 8, it asks about the Truman Doctrine. So American President Harry S. Truman basically says that we will support any nation turning its back on communism. And as a matter of fact, we will support any nation in its hour of need after World War II to ensure that you don't turn communist. What this is, guys, is America proclaiming through this doctrine, the Truman Doctrine, that they will actively try to stop nations from turning communist. Now, how are they going to do this? Well, that brings us into number 9 with this thing called the Marshall Plan. So the Marshall Plan, if you paid attention to the documentary, it was $17 billion pumped in to the nation or the different nations of Europe, right? Anywhere where there was struggle, there was the belief that there was a good chance that communism could be adopted, right? We've seen that when times are good, people are moderate and they're around the center of the political and economic spectrum. And when times go bad, that's when people start to push to the extremes. So to prevent people from turning to the far left now, right? Fascism is gone. What we're going to do is we're going to pump money in and rebuild the European economy to stabilize it and have the people not be desperate enough to turn towards communism. Now, it's called the Marshall Plan because it's named after the guy who thought it up, an American delegate by the name of George C. Marshall, right? He was a part of the Truman administration, and this is how he said, we're going to fix Europe and get them back on the road to prosperity so that they don't turn towards communism. So it was called in the documentary, guys, a massive plan of economic assistance, right? A massive plan of economic assistance. And basically it was a no strings attached loan to these nations, basically saying, okay, we're going to give you this money, but don't turn communist. And basically what it did is it rebuilt Europe, right? This was America doing good in the world. So it was backed by the United States of America, and $17 billion doesn't sound like a lot to you right now, or maybe it does, I don't know. But $17 billion in like the late 1940s was a lot of money, right? It was a lot of money. Okay, now number 10. At the Potsdam Conference, Germany was agreed to be divided into 4 occupational zones. Which nations were to administer these zones? Let's just flip back to this here and scroll up. And it says the division of Germany and Berlin. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, with the graphic here on the left, Germany was divided into a British zone, an American zone, and a French zone. Those were the allies during World War II. And then a 4th zone was given to the Soviet Union. Now that the war was over, right? World War II is over. They're no longer friends, right? The Western liberal democratic nations want one thing and the Soviets want another. Now, to make things even more complicated, the city of Berlin, you can see that right here, was further divided into 4 occupational zones as well, reflective of the 4 different powers that we see with the division of Germany. So Berlin was divided into a French sector, a British sector, and an American sector to the west. And then to the east, we had a Soviet sector. And collectively, we typically think of these 3 nations right here as West Germany, or sorry, as West Berlin. And we think of these nations over here, or sorry, this side of Berlin as East Berlin. So West Berlin and East Berlin. Over here, we have West Germany and we have East Germany. So if it's east anything, Berlin or Germany, it's Soviet controlled. And if it's west, Berlin or Germany, it's influenced by liberal democratic capitalism. So going back to the questions, the 4 occupational zones were British, French, and American for West Germany, and then the Soviet Union for East Germany. Now, number 11 asks, what was the problem with the division of the city of Berlin amongst the 4 different powers? Well, the problem with Berlin is that it is smack dab in the middle of East Germany, which is the Soviet occupational zone for the nation of Germany. So you had a microcosm of liberal democratic capitalist governance in Stalin's East Germany, and Stalin wanted them out. So what he does is he enacts, and this is number 12, the Berlin Blockade. So to get the Western Allies out of his East Germany and out of West Berlin, what Stalin does is he enacts something called the Berlin Blockade, where basically what he does is he turns off the power, he closes road and rail access to try to starve the Allies out. And the response of the Allies was very simple, and that was the Berlin Airlift, and that is the answer for number 13. The American response to the Berlin Blockade was the Berlin Airlift, and this was started by President Truman. If you watch the video, he said, "We're going to stay, period." They're not leaving, right? He is not backing down from the wishes of Joseph Stalin. So to just give you a little bit of perspective, the Berlin Airlift lasted for 15 months, and there was a total of 277,000 flights, and one left the area of West Germany and landed in West Berlin every 3 minutes, dumping off food, fuel like coal, medicine, all the things you need to have a major city exist. And in the end, Stalin relented. He actually gave up the Berlin Blockade because it made him look petty, and he was potentially sacrificing thousands of people, millions of people, to prove a point. So yeah, this was the first major victory of the Western powers when it came to the Cold War. Now, number 14 says West Germany is to democratic or communism as East Germany is to democracy or communism. So West Germany is democratic, right? That's the zone that is controlled by the Americans, by the Brits, and the French. East Germany is communist. That is the zone that is controlled by the USSR. Now remember, Berlin is in East Germany, and again, that's problematic. Now number 15 says, what was the West's response to the threat of the Soviet Union? What was the competing alliance that was created by the USSR? Okay, so guys, for number 15, the answer is NATO, NATO, and that stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So because of the threat of the Soviet Union, because of the fact that European nations were worried that the Soviets might continue to expand their sphere of influence into more of Western Europe, Western Europe joined with America and Canada to form something known as NATO. And basically what it was, guys, it was a collective response. It was these nations coming together under the banner of collective security in order to protect them against the awesome threat that was the Soviet Red Army and their military and their government's ambitiousness for the taking of territory. So yeah, that was NATO. And the competing alliance that the Soviet government created was known as the Warsaw Pact. And basically the Warsaw Pact was the Soviet Union along with its satellite states, right? Bulgaria, Romania, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, etc., right? All those nations behind the Iron Curtain coming together, again, under the idea of collective security. And basically, guys, the premise for both NATO and the Warsaw Pact was pretty simple. If any NATO nation is attacked by the Soviet Union, they will all collectively respond to that attack. Same thing with the Warsaw Pact. If any Warsaw Pact nation is attacked by any other nation, they will all collectively respond and try to repel that attack. And you can actually see that right here, right? This is basically NATO, right? With the exception of you can't see the United States and Canada. And this is basically the Warsaw Pact on this side right here. So the world became very much divided between these two ideological factions. All right, and then number 16, and this is the end of the second chapter. How is Mao's successful communist revolution in China a blow to the US and other liberal democracies? So the first communist state in the world was the Soviet Union, right? That happens in 1917 with the Bolshevik Revolution. In 1949, China has a civil war, and from that civil war, we see the emergence of Mao and the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, basically take control of China. And what happens here, guys, is the American policy of containment. Remember, in number 7, the goal of the United States was to ensure that communism doesn't spread anywhere else. Yet what we get here with the nation of China turning towards communism is a failure of containment. And this happens in 1949. 1949 is a really bad year for America. Not only does China turn communist, and this means that 500,000, 500 million new communists exist in the world, and China is a big, powerful nation. But in 1949, the USSR also successfully tests and detonates their first nuclear weapon. So that advantage, which was given to the United States from the Manhattan Project, is now gone. And if this used to be America and this used to be the Soviet Union down here, when you consider their military might, now things were level again. Now we have the Americans and the Soviets being on an even keel, and that's a big deal. All right, that is it for chapter 2. We'll continue on, folks. Peace out. See you later.